The famous doctor who denied help to a poor woman and then saw his life change in an unexpected way. The clock was approaching 7 in the evening when Mrs. Eleanor Thompson finally managed to reach the St. Francis Clinic in the heart of Fifth Avenue. She had saved for 3 months for that appointment, but the money ended up being used to buy medicine for her grandson, who had fallen ill the previous week. Still, she needed to see that doctor. The chest pains and shortness of breath were becoming more and more frequent, and at the health center in her neighborhood, in the outskirts of New York, the waiting list for cardiologists was scheduled for 8 months from now. Dr. Henry Mitchell finished reviewing the notes from his last patient and looked irritably at the gold watch on his wrist. 7:05. His office hours officially ended at 6:30, and he had reservations to dine with investors at 8 o'clock at the most exclusive restaurant in the city. The secretary knocked timidly on the door. "Doctor, I know we're closing, but there's a lady here who seems quite distressed, says she really needs a consultation." Henry sighed heavily. "Show her in, but be quick." The irritation was evident in every syllable. Mrs. Thompson entered the office slowly, impressed by the luxury of the environment. Walls covered with fine wood, diplomas framed in gold, a solid mahogany desk. It was a completely different world from the health center in Meadow Heights, where she usually received care. "Good evening, doctor," she said, clutching her worn purse against her chest. "I'm sorry to come without an appointment, but—" "Ma'am," interrupted the doctor without even raising his eyes from his papers, "we're closing. If you want a consultation, the secretary can schedule for next week. The first visit costs $1,000. Mrs. Thompson's heart tightened, not just from the physical pain she had been feeling, but from the coldness of those words. "Doctor, I saved money, but I had to use it for my grandson's medicine. The health center will only see me in 8 months. And these chest pains—" Dr. Mitchell finally looked at the 68-year-old woman in front of him. Gray hair pulled back in a simple bun, modest but clean clothes, hands marked by a lifetime of work. His clinical eye immediately identified the signs of someone with possible heart problems. But his business eye only saw someone who couldn't pay. "Ma'am, understand one thing. This is a private clinic. We don't do charity here. There are lines at public hospitals precisely for people in your situation. I can't see patients who can't pay. I have costs, commitments, a reputation to maintain." Mrs. Thompson felt tears welling up in her eyes, but maintained her dignity. "I understand, doctor. I was a nurse for 30 years. I know how the system works." Something in that sentence should have caught the doctor's attention, but he was more concerned about not being late for dinner with his potential investors for the new plastic surgery wing he was planning to build. "Melissa," he called to his secretary through the intercom, "please escort the lady to the exit, and don't accept anyone else without an appointment and confirmed payment." As the embarrassed secretary led Mrs. Thompson out, the doctor adjusted his Italian silk tie in the wall mirror. Perfect. At 48, Dr. Henry Mitchell was at the peak of his career. Graduated with honors from Harvard, specialized at Johns Hopkins, owner of the most prestigious cardiology clinic in New York, consultant to the most expensive hospitals in the country. His schedule was always full of patients willing to pay small fortunes for his consultations. Why should he waste time with those who couldn't pay? Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take the opportunity to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. This really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Mrs. Thompson left the clinic feeling the weight of humiliation. The New York night had already fallen, and the car headlights illuminated her path. She decided to walk a bit before catching the bus to Meadow Heights, in the southern outskirts of the city. She needed to calm her wounded heart. "God knows what he's doing," she murmured to herself as she did in difficult moments. 20 minutes later, Dr. Mitchell left his clinic. The valet had already brought his black Porsche Cayenne to the entrance. He checked messages on his phone while walking to the car, not paying attention to his path. He needed to confirm if the manager at the Four Seasons restaurant had reserved the most discreet table, as requested. That night could yield an investment of several million for the expansion of his clinic. That's when he felt a sharp pain in his chest, so strong that it made him stop abruptly. The phone slipped from his hands, falling to the ground. His vision began to darken around the edges, like an old photograph slowly burning. This can't be, he thought. I had a complete checkup last month. The pain increased, radiating to his left arm. His legs weakened. Cold sweat ran down his forehead as he tried to support himself on a lamppost. In seconds, he was on the ground. By an irony of fate, Mrs. Thompson was still there, sitting on a bench in the plaza across from the clinic, trying to gather strength to continue to the bus stop. She was the first to see the well-dressed man falling to the ground a few meters from her. Despite the dim lighting in the plaza, she immediately recognized the doctor who had just refused to see her. Her first instinct was to look the other way. Not my problem, she thought for a moment. After 30 years of caring for others as a nurse, she had learned that everyone deserves care, regardless of who they are. But that man had treated her as if she were less than human. For a moment she hesitated. However, that wasn't how her mother had raised her. That wasn't how she had practiced her profession for decades. That wasn't how she had taught her children and grandchildren to live. Mrs. Thompson ran to the fallen doctor. Her years of experience as a nurse surfaced instantly. She checked his vital signs: weak and irregular pulse, shallow breathing, cold, clammy skin, classic signs of a possible heart attack. "Help! We need help here," she shouted to passing pedestrians. She took off her own jacket to support the doctor's head while placing him in the correct position. "Someone call an ambulance. It's an emergency." A young man passing by immediately dialed 911. Other passers-by approached, curious. Mrs. Thompson maintained her calm, monitoring the doctor's pulse and talking to him even unconscious. "Dr. Mitchell, stay with us. Help is on the way. Breathe slowly. I'm here with you." 8 minutes later, the ambulance arrived. The paramedics took over, impressed with the precise measures Mrs. Thompson had taken. "Are you a doctor?" one of them asked while they prepared the defibrillator. "Retired nurse. I worked 30 years at Metropolitan Hospital." They nodded with respect. "You did everything right. You probably saved his life. Which hospital are you taking him to?" she asked. "St. Luke's. It's the closest with a coronary unit." Mrs. Thompson hesitated for a moment, but then asked, "May I accompany him?" "I'm such a friend." The paramedic shrugged. "Sure, ma'am. Hop in." During the journey, Dr. Mitchell briefly regained consciousness. Between the confusion and pain, his eyes met Mrs. Thompson's. A brief flash of recognition passed through his gaze before he returned to unconsciousness. At the hospital, Mrs. Thompson was directed to the waiting room while the doctor was taken directly to the coronary unit. She sat in one of the plastic chairs, exhausted. Should she leave? She had already done more than enough for someone who had despised her. Her grandson would be worried about her delay, but something kept her there. Perhaps the nurse inside her, who never abandoned a patient in need. Or maybe just the curiosity to see how this improbable story would end. 2 hours. Later, a doctor came looking for her. "You came with Dr. Henry Mitchell, correct?" "Yes, doctor. How is he?" "Stable. He had an acute myocardial infarction, but arrived in time. The gentleman was very lucky. If it weren't for the quick and correct assistance at the scene, he could have had serious complications." "Are you a relative?" "No, just an acquaintance, but I'm a retired nurse. I worked many years with emergencies." The doctor smiled. "That explains the excellent first response. He's sedated now, but can receive brief visits tomorrow. Would you like to leave a message or contact?" Mrs. Thompson thought for a moment. "No, doctor. Just tell him he was helped by someone he wouldn't help. Maybe that will make him reflect a bit." With those words, she finally left the hospital. It was almost midnight when she arrived home, in the small 2-story house where she lived with her youngest son, daughter-in-law, and 2 grandchildren. Everyone was worried about her delay. "Mom, what happened?" asked Charles, her son, as soon as she entered. "We tried calling several times." "I'm sorry, son. I ended up involved in an emergency. A man fell ill on the street and I needed to help." "Always taking care of others," smiled her daughter-in-law, Diana. "You need to take care of yourself, too. How was the appointment?" Mrs. Thompson sat down, tired. "I didn't even get to be seen. The doctor doesn't accept patients without money." "That's outrageous," exclaimed Charles, indignant. "After a lifetime caring for others, you deserve respect. Let it go, son. Life comes full circle. Believe me, today I learned that once again." The next morning, Dr. Mitchell woke up in a private room at St. Luke's Hospital. For a moment, he was disoriented, not understanding where he was or how he had gotten there. The white walls, the smell of alcohol and medications, the constant beep of the heart monitor. Then the memories returned like flashes, the searing pain in his chest, the feeling he was going to faint, the cold pavement and a familiar face, leaning over him. "Good morning, Dr. Mitchell," said the nurse, adjusting his IV. "Good to see you awake. Dr. Carter will examine you shortly." "What happened to me?" he asked in a hoarse voice. "You suffered an acute myocardial infarction. You were very lucky, you know. You were helped very quickly with perfect procedures until the ambulance arrived. That made all the difference in your case." Henry frowned, trying to organize the confused memories. "Who helped me? I vaguely remember someone talking to me, a woman." The nurse smiled. "From what I heard, it was an older lady. Retired nurse, apparently. Did everything right, positioning, monitoring, even organized the curious onlookers to clear space when the ambulance arrived. Experienced people, those who know what they're doing." Something in the description triggered an alert. In Henry's mind, an older woman experienced in nursing. It couldn't be. Did this woman leave any name contact? Not that I know of, but she left a curious message. She said to inform you that you were helped by someone you refused to help. Does that make any sense to you? A weight settled in Henry's chest, different from the physical pain of the heart attack. It was the uncomfortable compression of guilt. That humble lady he had coldly dismissed from his office hours before his sudden illness. It was her. It had to be her. "Yes," he answered, looking away. "It makes perfect sense." Dr. Carter, the cardiologist on duty, entered the room minutes later. He was a man in his 60s with grey hair and a serious expression. Henry recognized him immediately. They had participated in some conferences together. "Henry, my dear, what a scare you gave us," said Carter, examining the clipboard with the test results. "It's always a shock when we're the ones in the role of patients, isn't it? What did the heart attack cause? How long will I be here?" Henry got straight to the point, as he did with his own patients. "Typical doctor as a patient," smiled Carter, "always wanting to control everything. Look, we had to implant a stent in your right coronary artery. The procedure was a success, but you'll need a few days of observation and afterwards a few weeks of recovery. No stress, no long work hours, no getting irritated in traffic." "Impossible," cut in Henry. "I have a clinic to run, scheduled. Patients' planned surgeries, and you'll have to postpone all of that if you want to stay alive to carry them out in the future." Carter's voice hardened. "Henry, you know as well as I do, doctors are the worst patients. They think the rules of medicine apply to everyone except themselves. But your heart disagrees. You had a serious warning. The next one may not allow a second chance." Henry sighed, frustrated. He knew Carter was right, but he hated feeling vulnerable, dependent. He had spent his life building an image of strength and control, and now he was there, tied to monitors and medications. His life, literally in the hands of others. "There's one more thing," continued Carter. "The nurse told me about the lady who helped you. Do you know who she is?" "I have an idea, but I don't know her full name. She appeared at my clinic yesterday, shortly before I left." "Well, whoever she is, she literally saved your life. The paramedics said she executed all the protocols with impressive precision. If it had taken 10 more minutes to receive adequate help, we would be having a very different conversation now." Carter's words fell like a weight on Henry. That lady, whom he had not even deigned to look in the eyes during the consultation, had saved his life without hesitation, despite the treatment she had received. The irony was almost palpable. "I need to find her," he said suddenly. "I need to thank her." "Good idea," agreed Carter. "But first you need to recover. We'll do some more tests today, and if all goes well, in 3 or 4 days you can go home, with restrictions." After the doctor left, Henry was alone with his thoughts. The hospital room, despite being the best available, seemed suffocating. He, who had always been on the other side, now experienced the fragility and powerlessness he had so often seen in his patients. And more than that, he experienced a deep shame when thinking about the woman he had despised, and who, even so, had not hesitated to help him. During the next 3 days, while recovering in the hospital, Henry couldn't get Mrs. Thompson out of his head. He didn't know her full name or her address, only that she had mentioned being a retired nurse. Between calls to reorganize his schedule and reassure concerned patients, he asked his secretary, Melissa, to try to identify the lady who had appeared at the office that night. "Melissa, I need you to find information about that lady who appeared at the end of the day on Wednesday. The one I couldn't see." There was an embarrassed silence on the other end of the line. Melissa remembered the scene very well and how uncomfortable she had felt with the treatment given to the elderly woman. "Doctor, she didn't leave a filled-out form. I only know she mentioned living in Meadow Heights and being a retired nurse. She said she worked many years at Metropolitan Hospital." It was little, but it was a start. Henry asked Melissa to contact the Human Resources Department at Metropolitan to try to identify retired nurses who matched the description. It wouldn't be easy, but he was determined. On Saturday, when he finally received his discharge from the hospital, Henry was surprised by an unexpected visit. While waiting for the last documents to be signed, he saw a familiar figure standing at the door of the room. It was Mrs. Thompson, with her simple clothes and her impeccable grey bun, holding a small paper bag. "You," he murmured, genuinely surprised. "Good morning, Doctor," she said with serene dignity. "I came to see how you're doing." Henry felt a wave of contradictory emotions: shame, gratitude, guilt, relief, all at the same time. How did you know I was here?" "New York is big, but the health world is small," she smiled. "A friend of mine still works at the reception of this hospital. When she found out you were admitted here, she let me know. I came as soon as I heard you were being discharged today." Henry indicated the chair beside the bed. "Please, sit down. I'm very grateful for what you did. You saved my life." Mrs. Thompson sat down, placing the bag on her lap. "I only did what any healthcare professional would do, Doctor, what I was trained to do for 30 years. Even after the way I treated you." The words came out with difficulty. Henry wasn't used to admitting mistakes, especially because of that, she replied simply. "Sometimes we need to be reminded more of our humanity than of our errors." That phrase struck Henry deeply. How many times in his career had he forgotten that? How many patients had he treated as mere cases, numbers, sources of revenue? "I don't even know your full name," he admitted. Eleanor Thompson. I worked as a nurse at Metropolitan Hospital for 30 years, mainly in the cardiac emergency department. And I dismissed you without even hearing your symptoms," said Henry, his voice laden with regret. "You came with chest pains, didn't you? It could have been something serious." "Yes," she confirmed. "I've been feeling palpitations, shortness of breath, chest pains. I managed to save money for a private consultation because at the center in my neighborhood, the wait is 8 months to see a cardiologist." Henry closed his eyes for a moment, absorbing the absurdity of that situation. He, a specialist in cardiology, had dismissed a patient with clear cardiac symptoms, who later ended up saving his life from a heart attack. "Mrs. Thompson, I want to apologize. My behavior was unforgivable, and I want to make it up to you. Please, let me treat you. No cost. It's the least I can do." Mrs. Thompson observed the doctor for a long moment, as if assessing his sincerity. Then she nodded slightly. "I accept your apologies, Doctor, and I accept your offer of treatment, not for me, but because I believe this experience may have awakened something in you that has been dormant." She opened the bag she brought and took out a small glass jar. "I brought an herbal tea for you. Lemon balm with chamomile. It helps calm the heart, both the organ and the metaphorical one. My grandmother was a healer in rural Georgia, and some of her recipes work as well as many modern medications." Henry accepted the gift with genuine gratitude. "Thank you. I'll definitely drink it. I'll be at your clinic on Monday then," she said, standing up, "to begin my treatment if the offer is still good." "It will be. I'll leave instructions with Melissa. Actually," he hesitated, "I'll still be resting at home for a week following Dr. Carter's orders, but I can receive you there, if you don't mind. I have all the necessary equipment for a complete first examination." Mrs. Thompson seemed surprised, but nodded. "If it's more convenient for you." Henry wrote down his address and phone number on a sheet and handed it to her. Monday at 2 p.m. I'll be there, doctor. Rest well until then. And drink the tea. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take the opportunity to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. This really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. On Monday, punctually at 2 p.m., the doorbell of Henry's penthouse in the Upper East Side rang. His butler, Anthony, escorted Mrs. Thompson to the living room where Henry was waiting for her. The expression of amazement on the lady's face as she entered the apartment did not go unnoticed. The luxury was evident in every detail. Italian, marble flooring, original artwork on the walls, designer furniture. A lifetime of ostentation built on the high fees charged to wealthy patients. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Thompson," greeted Henry, rising from the sofa. He was still pale and visibly thinner, but looked better than at the hospital. "Please sit down. Would you like some tea? By the way, your tea did me a lot of good. I drank it every day." "Thank you, doctor. Tea would be wonderful." While Anthony provided the drinks, Henry observed his guest. There was something about her that intrigued him, a serene dignity, a quiet strength that seemed to emanate naturally without any effort. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Physically better every day, mentally. Let's say I'm re-evaluating many things." He paused, choosing his words. "You know, Mrs. Thompson, I've been thinking a lot about our first meeting, about how I treated you, and about how, even so, you didn't hesitate to help me when I needed it. As I said, doctor, I only did what should be done, what any decent person would do. No, it wasn't just that. You could have simply called the ambulance and left, but you stayed with me. You accompanied me to the hospital. You ensured I received proper care." "Why?" Mrs. Thompson took a sip of the tea that Anthony had just served before answering. "Because I saw something more in you than that cold man from the office. Seeing you fallen, vulnerable, I saw only a human being needing help. And besides, I wanted to believe that the doctor who dismissed me wasn't the real Dr. Henry Mitchell, but just a version of him who lost his way over the years." Henry was silent, absorbing those words. It was exactly what he had been feeling. In recent days, as if he had lost his true purpose, his true self, over the years of a successful career, but increasingly distant from the ideals that led him to medicine. "You're right," he finally admitted. "At some point I lost my way. I started medicine wanting to help people save lives. I ended up charging absurd amounts and treating patients as clients, products, sources of revenue. I don't even know when that happened. It happens gradually," she said gently, "like water that, drop by drop, modifies the stone. We rarely notice the small changes until we look back and see how far we've strayed from the starting point." Henry smiled. "For a nurse, you philosophize very well. I spent 30 years on the front lines, doctor. I've seen it all. Disease doesn't discriminate between rich or poor, educated or illiterate. In the emergency room, everyone is equal, fragile, frightened, needing compassion as much as medication." After a longer conversation, Henry led Mrs. Thompson to the study. He had adapted as a small office at home. He performed a detailed examination, collected a complete medical history, measured blood pressure, and did an electrocardiogram with the portable equipment he kept for emergencies. "The symptoms you describe are concerning, but still not conclusive," he said after analyzing the preliminary results. "We'll need more detailed tests. Echocardiogram, stress test, maybe even a catheterization, depending on the results." Fear briefly passed through Mrs. Thompson's eyes. "Those are expensive tests, doctor. They will be done at my clinic at no cost, as I promised." Henry paused. "Actually, Mrs. Thompson, I'd like to propose something more. You mentioned that you retired as a nurse. Do you still maintain an active professional license?" "Yes, I do. Sometimes I still do some volunteer shifts in health campaigns in the community." "Perfect. I'd like to invite you to work with me, not as a regular employee, but as a consultant. I need someone to help me reconnect with the true spirit of medicine. Someone who constantly reminds me why I chose this profession." Mrs. Thompson seemed genuinely surprised. "You want me, a retired nurse from the suburbs, to be a consultant to the famous Dr. Henry Mitchell? I think the heart attack affected more than your heart, doctor. They both laughed, breaking the tension. "I'm serious. I'll pay a fair value for your hours, and as part of the agreement, I'll personally take care of your health." He extended his hand. "Do we have a deal?" After a moment of hesitation, Mrs. Thompson shook the offered hand. "We have a deal, Doctor, but I have one condition." "Which is?" "That you truly be open to changes, not just to impress a lady who helped you, but because you really want to be a better doctor." "I promise," said Henry, and for the first time, in many years, he felt he was making a promise he truly intended to keep. In the following weeks, while gradually recovering, Henry began to implement changes in his clinic, always with Mrs. Thompson's guidance. To start, he established one day a week dedicated to free care for patients without resources. He instructed Melissa to reserve 4 hours of his Wednesdays for these cases. The news spread quickly. Soon, the slots for free care were filled for weeks. Henry found himself more energized and satisfied with these consultations than with his regular, highly paid ones. The genuine gratitude in the eyes of those patients awakened something that had been dormant within him for a long time. Mrs. Thompson, for her part, underwent all the tests. The diagnosis wasn't as serious as initially feared: a cardiac arrhythmia, treatable with medications and lifestyle changes. Henry personally took care of every detail of her treatment, ensuring she received the best available medication and regular monitoring. But not everything was running smoothly. The changes implemented by Henry began to generate reactions among his fellow doctors, and especially among the clinic partners. On a Thursday afternoon, Dr. Richard Anderson, one of the 3 minority partners in the clinic, appeared without warning in Henry's office. Tall, always impeccably dressed, Richard cultivated an appearance of success as meticulously as he cultivated his connections with New York's elite. "Henry, we need to talk," he said, closing the office door behind him. "Strange rumors are circulating about you." Henry sighed. He knew this moment would come. "What kind of rumors, Richard?" "That you're seeing patients for free. That you're referring patients without resources to have expensive tests done at our clinic, without charging anything. That you hired a retired nurse as a consultant for some mysterious project." Richard made air quotes with his fingers when mentioning the word consultant. "Is it true?" "For the most part, yes. I'm dedicating one period of the week to free consultations. And yes, Mrs. Thompson is helping me reorganize some procedures at the clinic." Richard sat down, incredulous. "Have you gone crazy? Do you know how much this is costing? Do you know the impact it will have on our reputation?" "We built this clinic to serve the elite, Henry. The moment we become the place that also serves for free, our premium clients will start looking elsewhere." "I disagree. In fact, I believe this can improve our image. Social responsibility is an increasingly appreciated value, even among the wealthiest." Richard let out a dry laugh. "Please, they want to appear socially responsible in their Instagram posts, not share the waiting room with people who can't pay. Not to mention the financial aspect. Each hour you spend seeing patients for free is an hour that could be generating revenue. The clinic continues to be profitable, Richard. My free consultations are not significantly affecting the bottom line." "Not yet," emphasized Richard. "But what about when this phase of charity expands? And when other doctors on the team start questioning why they should only see paying patients while the great Dr. Mitchell plays Robin Hood of medicine?" He leaned forward. "Look, I understand the trauma, the heart attack, the experience of almost losing everything. That messes with anyone's head. But don't throw away everything we've built because of a passing existential crisis." The conversation continued for a few more minutes, with Richard alternating between economic arguments and appeals to Henry's sanity. In the end, he left, the office visibly irritated with Henry's refusal to reconsider his decisions. That night, when reporting the incident to Mrs. Thompson during their follow-up session, Henry was visibly disturbed. "They don't understand, Mrs. Thompson. For Richard and the others, everything comes down to money, status, appearances. And for you, before the heart attack, wasn't it like that too?" she asked with her characteristic frankness. Henry stopped, caught off guard by the direct question. "Yes," he admitted after a moment. "It was exactly like that. And the worst part is that I didn't even realize how far I had strayed from the ideals that led me to medicine. Then give your colleagues time. You had a dramatic awakening, literally life or death. They haven't had that opportunity yet. And if they never understand, then you'll have decisions to make, but don't worry about that now. True changes are rarely easy or quick. In the following weeks, the tension at the clinic increased. The other doctors on the team were divided. Some secretly admired Henry's initiative, others resented the pressure they felt to follow his example, and still others feared the possible financial consequences. In the midst of this climate of uncertainty, an unexpected ally emerged. Dr. Amanda Patel, a newly hired cardiologist, graduated with honors and with a postgraduate degree from the United Kingdom. Despite her youth, only 32, Amanda already had an impressive resume and could have chosen any elite clinic to work at. Her decision to join Henry's team, even amid the controversies, surprised everyone. "Why did you choose to come here now?" asked Henry during his first private meeting with the new hire. "You must have received better offers." Amanda smiled. "I did, in fact. But none offered me what I'm seeing here, a renowned doctor who decided to do the right thing, even if it means swimming against the current. Besides," she hesitated, "besides, my mother was one of your patients 3 years ago, Margaret Patel. You probably don't remember, you see so many people." Henry frowned, trying to recall. "Mitral valve problem." "Exactly. She needed surgery, but our insurance refused coverage, claiming a pre-existing condition. We were desperate. You not only performed the surgery, but personally negotiated with the hospital to reduce the costs. You saved her life." Henry was perplexed. He vaguely remembered the case, but didn't recall doing anything extraordinary. He had simply followed the necessary medical protocols. "You see, even at the height of your mercantile phase, as you say, there was still humanity in your actions. That's why I'm here, to help amplify that part of you that always existed, even when it was dormant." Amanda's presence brought new life to the clinic. Young, idealistic, but also extremely competent and pragmatic, she helped Henry better structure his free care project, making it more efficient and sustainable. Together, they managed to implement a triage system that ensured that limited resources were directed to those who needed them most. The project, initially informally called Solidarity Wednesday, began to take on more defined contours. Amanda suggested formalizing it as an official program of the clinic, with a name, visual identity, and even controlled publicity. "If we're going to do this, let's do it right," she argued. "We can transform this initiative into a model for other private clinics. Show that it's possible to combine medical excellence, financial sustainability, and social responsibility." Thus was born the Open Heart Program, officially launched 2 months after Henry's heart attack. The program not only offered free consultations with specialists for low-income patients, but also included continued follow-up, health education, and even support for obtaining medications. Mrs. Thompson became a fundamental piece in implementing the program. Her experience in the public system, combined with her deep knowledge of the real needs of the most vulnerable patients, ensured that the program really made a difference in people's lives, instead of just being an exercise in social marketing. However, as the program grew, so did the resistance within the clinic. Richard and the other partners began to raise increasingly blunt objections during administrative meetings. The critical point came when Henry proposed expanding the program to 2 days a week due to the enormous demand. "Absolutely not," exploded Richard during a particularly tense meeting. "We've tolerated this charity project of yours for long. Enough, Henry. It's affecting our image, our cash flow, and even the morale of the team. Some doctors are complaining that they're pressured to participate in the program, while others resent the disproportionate attention it receives." The other. 2 minority partners, Dr. Paul Monroe and Dr. Claudia Feldman, nodded in agreement. "We inherited more than 30 patients from Dr. Silverman when he moved to London last month," added Claudia. "Class A patients, willing to pay whatever is necessary for premium care. 3 of them have already cancelled appointments upon discovering they would have to wait longer because their dates coincided with your social program." Henry remained calm, something he wouldn't have been able to do before his heart attack. I understand your concerns, I really do, but I ask that you look at the numbers before making a hasty decision. Our revenue hasn't fallen. In fact, it increased 8% in the last quarter. The program is generating positive publicity. We received an honorable mention from the American Medical Association and a laudatory report in the New York Times. Publicity doesn't pay bills, retorted Paul. And what about our image of exclusivity? We built this clinic to be the most sophisticated and discreet space for New York's elite. Now, on Wednesdays, our waiting room looks like that of a public health center. The discussion continued for another hour without reaching a consensus. In the end, Richard issued an ultimatum. As minority partners, we can't prevent you from continuing with this program, Henry, but we can, together, call a general meeting and propose a revision of the clinic's social contract. Think about it. Henry knew exactly what that meant. They were threatening to force a restructuring that could end his majority position or even remove him from the partnership. Legally, it would be difficult, but with good lawyers and a well-orchestrated campaign among the other doctors, they could create a professionally unbearable environment. That night, in his penthouse, Henry discussed the situation with Amanda and Mrs. Thompson. "Can they really remove you from your own clinic?" asked Mrs. Thompson, concerned. "Legally, it's complicated. I'm the majority partner with 60% of the shares. But they can make my life impossible, sabotage the program, drive away patients." Henry ran his hand through his hair, visibly tense. "And they're right on one point. The clinic was conceived to serve a specific profile of patient. Completely reformulating its purpose may not be fair to those who invested based on the original model. What if we created something new?" Amanda suddenly suggested. "Instead of trying to transform St. Francis Clinic into something it was never designed to be, we could use the resources and experience we have to create a new space, something built from the ground up, with the purpose of uniting cutting-edge medicine and accessibility." The idea caught Henry by surprise. "Are you suggesting I give up the clinic I built over 20 years? Not necessarily. You could maintain your participation there, leaving the management more in the hands of the other partners, while directing your energy and part of the resources to this new project. A hybrid clinic, perhaps. With premium care, yes, but also with a substantial wing dedicated to patients without resources." Henry was silent, considering the proposal. It was radical, but it had logic. It would allow him to pursue his new vision without constantly being in conflict with the partners and the established culture of St. Francis Clinic. "I would support this idea," said Mrs. Thompson softly, "and I know many excellent professionals who work in public hospitals and philanthropic hospitals who would love to participate in a project like this." "It would be starting practically from scratch," pondered Henry. "Significant investment, new processes, new team, but also the chance to build something truly revolutionary," completed Amanda. "A model that could be replicated in other cities, perhaps even in other countries." The seed had been planted. In the following days, Henry couldn't think of anything else. He began doing research, analyzing numbers, discreetly talking with other doctors who might have interest in participating in the project. A week later, he received a phone call that would change everything. It was John Paul Morgan, a successful businessman in the pharmaceutical sector, who requested an emergency consultation for his father, who was having worrying symptoms. The appointment took place on Sunday at the Morgan family residence. The diagnosis wasn't good. Mr. Morgan would need complex heart surgery urgently. Henry explained the situation with clarity and compassion, qualities that had always been his trademarks as a doctor, even in times when he prioritized financial aspects. After the consultation, while having a coffee, John Paul surprised Henry with an unexpected question. "Dr. Mitchell, I've heard about your free care program. Is it true that you're facing resistance from your partners because of it?" Henry hesitated, not knowing how to respond. John Paul smiled. "New York is small, Doctor, especially in business circles. My secretary is the cousin of Dr. Richard's secretary. News travels fast. Yes, we're having some differences in vision, nothing that can't be resolved with dialogue." John Paul nodded thoughtfully. "You know, I lost my younger sister 5 years ago. cerebral aneurysm. She was in a small town upstate when it happened. The local hospital didn't have adequate equipment. The doctor on duty didn't have experience with cases like that. When we managed to transfer her to New York, it was already too late. Henry expressed his condolences, but John Paul continued. Since then, I've been looking for ways to contribute to improving access to quality healthcare in America. We created a foundation in her name, we fund some research, we donate equipment, but I've never found a project that really addressed the problem in a systematic and sustainable way. A light lit up in Henry's eyes. And what would you think about a clinic that combined medical excellence with real accessibility? A hybrid model where high-income patients would partially subsidize care for those who can't pay. I would think it's exactly the kind of initiative that the Mary Louise Morgan Foundation would like to support. John Paul extended his business card. Let's talk about this week, Doctor. After you take care of my father, of course. Mr. Morgan's surgery was a success, and as promised, John Paul invited Henry to a meeting at his company headquarters. There, Henry formally presented his idea for the new clinic, now more developed after conversations with Amanda and Mrs. Thompson. We call the project New Paths Clinic, explained Henry, showing slides with the preliminary business plan. A center of medical excellence with two aspects, traditional premium care and a subsidized care program for low-income patients. It's not about occasional charity, but a business model structured to be both socially impactful and financially sustainable. John Paul listened attentively, asking insightful questions about financial, operational, and scalability aspects of the project. At the end of the presentation, he seemed impressed. Dr. Mitchell, I rarely see such well-founded projects. The combination of medical knowledge, social vision, and economic viability is remarkable. The Mary Louise Foundation would like to be a partner in this venture. Henry could hardly believe it. It means we're willing to contribute 40% of the initial investment needed in exchange for a minority stake and a seat on the administrative board. More importantly, we want to help expand this model to other cities after it's consolidated in New York. It was more than Henry could have hoped for. With this support, New Paths Clinic moved from the realm of dreams to concrete possibility. In the following days, while the details of the partnership were being worked out, Henry decided it was time to speak openly with his partners at St. Francis Clinic. He called an extraordinary meeting and explained his decision to gradually distance himself from direct management to dedicate himself to the new project. I propose selling 30% of my stake to you three in equal parts. I'll maintain 30% without operational decision-making power, just as a silent investor. You'll have full autonomy to manage the clinic according to the original vision. The proposal was received with surprise, but also with evident relief from the three partners. For them, it was the ideal solution. Henry stepped away as a manager. They assumed control, and they would still maintain the association with his name and reputation. It's a wise decision, Henry, said Richard, barely disguising his satisfaction. We're different doctors with different visions. That doesn't mean one is right and the other wrong. Indeed, agreed Henry, with a serenity that would have been impossible for his former self. We've simply chosen different paths. When the news of Henry's partial departure and the new venture began to circulate, the reactions were varied. Some doctors at St. Francis Clinic decided to accompany him on the new journey, including Amanda, who would be the clinical director of New Paths. Others preferred to remain in the already established and profitable environment of the original clinic. The specialized press reported the movement, speculating on the real reasons behind the decision of one of the most renowned cardiologists in the country to abandon the clinic he founded to start a project with a more social profile. Some suggested it was just a marketing strategy. Others, more cynical, spread rumors about supposed financial or ethical problems that would have forced Henry to make this change. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take the opportunity to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. This really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Among those who doubted Henry's intentions was Dr. Frank Thomas, an old college colleague, and now clinical director of one of the largest private hospitals in New York. Frank and Henry had competed fiercely throughout their careers, always rivaling for positions, awards, and recognition. While Henry had built his empire through his private clinic, Frank had followed the corporate path, rising in the hospital hierarchy. Frank took the opportunity to sow doubts about Henry's new venture in meetings of the Medical Association and other professional forums. "Of course I admire colleague Mitchell's sudden altruism," he commented with evident irony, "but I wonder what would really motivate a doctor who spent 2 decades charging the highest fees in the city to suddenly dedicate himself to the poor. Perhaps we should investigate whether there isn't some tax benefit or strategic marketing behind this so convenient conversion." The insinuations were carefully calculated to appear as legitimate concerns, although their purpose was clearly to undermine the credibility of the project before it even began to operate. Henry, aware of the rumors, initially opted to ignore them. "Our actions will speak louder than any words," he would say to his team when the subject arose. However, the situation became complicated when an influential newspaper published a report with the sensationalist headline, "Medical Empire at Risk: The Real Reasons Behind Dr. Mitchell's Social Conversion." The article, clearly based on anonymous sources, suggested financial problems at St. Francis Clinic and even possible malpractice lawsuits that would have motivated Henry's change of course. "This is pure slander," protested Amanda upon reading the report. "We should sue the newspaper." "That would give more visibility to these lies," pondered Henry, although visibly shaken. "Besides, a defamation lawsuit rarely results in significant retraction and can take years." "But we can't simply leave this unanswered," insisted Amanda. "It's affecting our credibility with potential partners and even patients." It was Mrs. Thompson who offered a different perspective. "When I worked at Metropolitan, I learned that the best response to rumors is transparency. Why not invite the press to get to know the project firsthand, show exactly what we're building instead of letting them speculate?" The suggestion was accepted, and in a few days they organized an event for journalists and opinion makers at the location where the New Paths Clinic would be built. The land, in the Brooklyn Heights neighborhood, had been recently acquired, and work adapting the existing building had already begun. During the event, Henry spoke openly about his personal experience, the heart attack, the help received from Mrs. Thompson, and how it had transformed his vision of medicine and his own career. "I spent 20 years being a technically excellent doctor, but gradually forgetting the reason that led me to medicine, caring for people, not just hearts. This project is not a marketing strategy or a financial maneuver. It's an attempt to rebalance my contribution to society, to use my knowledge and resources to make a difference in the lives of those who really need it, without giving up the excellence I've always strived for." John Paul Morgan also participated in the event, explaining the involvement of the Mary Louise Foundation and how the project aligned with their objectives of democratizing access to quality healthcare. With his impeccable reputation as a businessman and philanthropist, his presence lent additional credibility to the initiative. But the most impactful moment of the event came when Mrs. Thompson took the small, improvised stage. With her characteristic simplicity and dignity, she shared her perspective as a retired nurse and as a patient. "I worked for 30 years in the public health system. I've seen it all: extraordinary dedication from professionals, patients who couldn't get the necessary care in time, doctors who gradually became insensitive due to overload. And I also saw many wrong things, schemes that harmed the most vulnerable." She paused, taking a breath. Henry noticed she seemed nervous, something unusual in her normally serene personality. "What we're building here is a bridge between two worlds that rarely communicate, that of cutting-edge private medicine and that of the real needs of the population that can't pay for it. It's not charity, it's justice. It's not marketing, it's purpose." The sincerity of her words deeply touched those present. Even the most skeptical journalists seemed impressed with the authenticity of that lady of fragile appearance, but firm voice. The event was a success, generating positive coverage that largely neutralized the previous rumors. However, a few days later, Henry received a disturbing call from John Paul. "Doctor, a delicate situation has arisen. One of the main investors in my company, Dr. Frank Thomas, expressed concerns about our partnership with your project. He said he has information about supposed irregularities in your medical practice. Henry felt his blood run cold. What kind of irregularities? This is absurd. He vaguely mentioned confidential malpractice lawsuits, possible insurance fraud. Nothing concrete, just insinuations. But enough to cause discomfort among some members of the Foundation's board. We need to clarify this quickly. Henry was furious. He knew exactly what Frank was doing, using his influence to sabotage the project out of pure envy and pettiness. But simply denying the accusations wouldn't be enough. He needed to prove they were unfounded. I'll provide all the necessary documentation to prove that these insinuations are completely false. My professional reputation is impeccable. I've never been sued for malpractice, never had any problems with insurance companies or insurers. After hanging up, Henry called an emergency meeting with his legal and administrative team. They needed to prepare a complete dossier on his career and professional practices to present to the Mary Louise Foundation. While the team worked, Henry decided to confront Frank directly. He went to the hospital where his rival worked and requested a meeting. "Henry, what a pleasant surprise," said Frank with an artificial smile as he received him in his office. "To what do I owe the honor?" "Let's get straight to the point, Frank. I know you're spreading rumors about me to sabotage my new project. I want to understand why." Frank maintained his smile, but his eyes hardened. "My dear, I don't know what you're talking about. I merely expressed legitimate concerns about such a radical change in professional direction. It's my duty as a member of the medical community to question potentially questionable practices. There's nothing questionable about my project or my professional conduct, and you know it. I'm building something important, something that can really make a difference in the lives of thousands of people. Why try to destroy that?" Frank stood up, abandoning the cordial facade. "You know why, Henry? Because you always got everything. First in the class in college, residency at the best institution, own clinic at 35, magazine features, international lectures, and now when your elitist business model starts to lose its shine, you reinvent yourself as the people's doctor and still get million-dollar funding for it." The bitterness in Frank's voice was palpable. Henry realized he wasn't dealing with just a professional rival, but with someone consumed by decades of resentment. "This isn't a competition, Frank. It never was. We're doctors. Our duty is to care for people. If you really care about the profession and the patients, you should support any initiative that expands access to quality treatments. Spare me your newly discovered sermons about medical ethics. For years, you were the symbol of everything. Wrong with private medicine, exorbitant prices, VIP treatment for celebrities and politicians, lectures paid for by pharmaceutical laboratories. And now you want to pass yourself off as Mother Teresa?" Henry took a deep breath, controlling his anger. "I'm not trying to be a saint, Frank. I just recognize that I can do better, do more. And I'm willing to put my money, my reputation, and my professional future on it. If you can't understand that, I'm sorry for you." He turned to leave, but before reaching the door, he added, "Oh, and just so you know, I'm preparing a complete dossier on my career to present to the Mary Louise Foundation. Every case I treated, every procedure performed, everything documented and verifiable. When they see that, your insinuations will look exactly like what they are, pathetic attempts at sabotage driven by envy." Upon returning to the temporary headquarters of New Paths Clinic, Henry found the team in a climate of concern. Amanda came to meet him as soon as he entered. "Something happened. One of our first patients from the pilot program is suing the clinic. He claims there was negligence in the treatment and is demanding an exorbitant indemnity." Henry felt a weight in his stomach. "Who? What case are we talking about?" "Mr. Jack Sullivan, 63 years old, seen 3 weeks ago for suspected angina. We performed the standard tests, detected no significant obstructions, prescribed drug treatment and scheduled a follow-up for reassessment." "I remember him. What's the allegation?" "He says he got sick 2 days after the consultation, had to go to another hospital where they found he needed urgent catheterization. He's claiming he almost lost his life due to our negligence in not indicating the procedure immediately." "That doesn't make sense," protested Henry. The test didn't indicate a need for immediate catheterization. We followed all protocols. Mrs. Thompson, who was observing the conversation from nearby, intervened. Dr. Henry, did you notice something strange when I mentioned wrong schemes in the health system during my speech at the event? Henry stopped, recalling. Yes. You seemed nervous, something unusual for you. Because there's something I haven't told you yet, something about my past that might explain what's happening now. Mrs. Thompson asked them to sit down for a private conversation. Her normally serene face showed signs of anguish. 15 years ago, when I was still working at Metropolitan Hospital, I discovered a serious scheme. Some doctors, in collusion with administrative staff and representatives of suppliers, were falsifying indications for expensive procedures, mainly cardiac and neurological surgeries. They received commissions for each unnecessary surgery performed. Henry and Amanda listened attentively, shocked by the revelation. When I discovered it, I gathered evidence and reported it to the hospital management. The result? Those involved were too powerful. The investigation was archived, and I was transferred to a peripheral sector away from the ICU where I could witness what was happening. Eventually, they created a pretext to fire me. And you never took this further? To the police, to the district attorney? Asked Amanda. I tried, but without internal support, without more access to evidence, my word alone wasn't enough. I was labeled as problematic, a groundless whistleblower. It even affected my chances of getting another job afterwards. She paused painfully. The worst part is that the scheme continued, and one of the main people involved was Dr. Frank Thomas. Henry felt as if he had been punched. Frank, are you sure? Absolutely. He was one of those who profited most from the scheme. At the time, he was still building his career. Today, with his prominent position, I imagine he has even more sophisticated methods. And you think this lawsuit against us? Began Amanda. It's very convenient, don't you think? Just when Dr. Frank is trying to undermine the credibility of the project, a lawsuit for negligence appears. And observe the pattern. Patient without clear indication for invasive procedure suddenly discovers at another hospital that he needed the procedure. Mrs. Thompson's theory made sense, but there was still a missing piece. How would Frank know who our patients are? This information is confidential, questioned Henry. Someone inside the clinic might be passing information, suggested Amanda. Perhaps some employee with connections to his hospital or to the old schemes that Mrs. Thompson mentioned. Henry's gaze hardened. We'll find this out, and we'll face this lawsuit with complete transparency and scientific rigor. If we followed the protocols correctly, there's nothing to be ashamed of. In the following weeks, while they prepared the defense for the lawsuit and continued to investigate the possible connection with Frank, work on the new clinic progressed. The date of the official inauguration approached, and the interest of the medical community and society in general grew every day. John Paul Morgan, after receiving the complete dossier on Henry's career and personally analyzing the case of the patient who was suing them, reaffirmed his support for the project. I know enough people to recognize character, Dr. Mitchell. I'm more convinced than ever that New Paths Clinic is exactly the kind of initiative that America needs. Meanwhile, Mrs. Thompson dedicated herself fully to the project, helping to structure care protocols that combined clinical efficiency with humanization. Her experience as a nurse in high-pressure environments proved invaluable in creating a welcoming but also technically impeccable environment. A month before the inauguration, a surprising discovery changed the course of events. Patricia, a newly hired young administrative assistant, sought Henry in private. Doctor, I need to confess something. I was hired by Dr. Frank Thomas to spy on the project and report information about patients' protocols, anything he could use against you. Henry was stunned. Why are you telling me this now? Patricia's eyes filled with tears. Because I saw what you're really building here, and because my mother was seen last week by the program with a care she never received in any public or private hospital in her life. I can't continue betraying people who are really trying to make a difference. Patricia provided concrete evidence. Emails, text messages, even recordings of conversations with Frank, where he clearly outlined his intentions to sabotage the project. More seriously, she confirmed that he had directly approached Mr. Jack Sullivan convincing him to file the lawsuit against the clinic. He literally sought out your patients, offered money and priority care at his hospital in exchange for participation in the scheme. Mr. Sullivan was the only one who accepted. It was the evidence they needed. With care and proper legal advice, Henry decided to use this information not only to defend himself in the lawsuit, but also to expose Frank's unethical behavior. In an extraordinary meeting of the Medical Association, in the presence of directors of the main hospitals in the city and journalists specialized in health, Henry presented the evidence, not only about the recent sabotage, but also, with Mrs. Thompson's permission, about the unnecessary procedures scheme from 15 years ago. American medicine faces many challenges: limited access, insufficient resources, glaring inequality. But perhaps the most pernicious is the corruption that hides within our own system, practiced by those who have sworn to protect lives. Today, I'm not here just to defend my reputation, but to defend patients' right to truth and integrity in medical care. The revelation caused an earthquake in New York's medical community. Frank Thomas was removed from his duties at the hospital while an internal investigation was conducted. Mr. Jack Sullivan withdrew the lawsuit against the clinic and made a public statement admitting he had been manipulated. And more importantly, several other people began to speak up, reporting similar experiences of unnecessary procedures or improper charges, not only involving Frank, but other doctors and institutions. The scandal, although painful for the medical community as a whole, ended up having a purifying effect. Medical boards from various states announced more rigorous audits and greater transparency in the processes of investigating complaints. Public and private hospitals reviewed their informed consent protocols and surgical indication reviews. For New Paths Clinic, the timing couldn't have been more opportune. The inauguration, held amid great expectation, became a symbol of the new era that American medicine was seeking: more ethical, more accessible, more humane. On the day of the official ceremony, the clinic's spacious lobby was full. Doctors, nurses, press, health authorities, representatives of non-governmental organizations, everyone wanted to witness the birth of that innovative project. Among the guests of honor, seated in the front row, was Mrs. Thompson, elegant in a simple dress but worthy of the occasion. Henry, upon taking the stage for his speech, felt an emotion different from anything he had ever experienced in his career. It wasn't the pride of earning a new title or opening a luxurious clinic. It was something deeper, more meaningful. 6 months ago, I suffered a heart attack that almost took my life. I fell on the sidewalk, alone, vulnerable, dependent, on the kindness of strangers. And it was precisely a stranger, someone whom I had denied help hours before, who didn't hesitate to help me. He paused, looking directly at Mrs. Thompson, whose eyes were already filling with tears. At that moment, I received more than medical first aid. I received a lesson about the true meaning of our profession, about what really matters when everything else is removed: titles, money, status. What remains is just this: our fundamental commitment to the well-being of others. Henry explained the philosophy behind New Paths Clinic. It wasn't just an institution with a charitable wing, but a new business model where technical excellence and equitable access were not mutually exclusive. This is just the beginning. Our model is deliberately designed to be replicable, adaptable to different contexts and regions. We dream of a future where clinics like this are not exceptions, but the norm, where access to quality healthcare doesn't depend on the zip code or the bank account of the patient. At the end of the speech, Henry called Mrs. Thompson to the stage. The surprise on her face was evident. New Paths Clinic would not have existed without this extraordinary woman, not only because she physically saved my life, but because she helped me rediscover my vocation, my purpose. Therefore, the administrative board decided unanimously to name our community care wing as the Eleanor Thompson Space, a permanent tribute to someone who never lost faith in humanity, even when we doctors sometimes forgot it. The revelation was received with enthusiastic applause from the audience. Mrs. Thompson, visibly moved, hugged Henry before addressing the microphone. "I never sought recognition or honors," she said with a choked voice. "As a nurse, I learned that our work often happens in the shadows, away from the spotlight. But I accept this honor not for me, but for all the healthcare professionals who, like me, dedicated their lives to caring for others with dignity and respect." She paused to control her emotion. "When Dr. Mitchell refused to see me that night, I didn't feel anger. I felt sadness. Not for me, but for him, for all the brilliant doctors who, pressured by the system, end up losing the connection with the original purpose of their vocation. When I saw him fallen on the sidewalk, I didn't hesitate because for me there was never another option. That doesn't make me special, just human." The simplicity and honesty of her words deeply touched everyone present. At the end of the ceremony, as the guests toured the facilities of the new clinic, many made a point of approaching Mrs. Thompson to greet her, thank her, share similar stories. Among them was a young resident doctor who timidly asked for a few minutes of conversation. "Mrs. Thompson, your story has deeply inspired me. I'm at the beginning of my career and already feel the pressure to choose the most lucrative path, to forget why I really chose medicine. How did you manage to keep your principles intact for so many years, even facing injustices?" Mrs. Thompson smiled, something she did more frequently since becoming involved with the clinic project. "My dear, integrity is not something you maintain once in a great heroic gesture. It's something you practice daily in small choices. Each time you choose to truly listen to a patient instead of rushing the consultation, each time you explain a diagnosis with patience and empathy, each time you question an unnecessary procedure, you are protecting not only the integrity of the profession, but your own." The young doctor nodded, absorbing those words that carried the weight of decades of experience and wisdom. "And is it worth it?" she asked, "even when it seems that the entire system works against it?" "Worth every second," replied Mrs. Thompson without hesitation, "because at the end of the day, when you rest your head on the pillow, it's not the size of your bank account that brings true peace. It's knowing that you made a real difference in someone's life, that you relieved suffering, that you brought comfort, that for a moment, you made the world a little less cruel for someone vulnerable." That conversation at the end of the inauguration ceremony perfectly encapsulated the essence of what New Paths Clinic represented. Not just a new business model in healthcare, but a redirection of values, a reminder of the true purpose of medicine. In the following months, the project proved to be not only viable but surprisingly successful. High-income patients sought the clinic not only for technical excellence, but also for the social purpose with which they could identify. The subsidized care program grew in a sustainable way, benefiting hundreds of people who otherwise would never have access to that level of care. Henry, now dividing his time between clinical practice and strategic management of the project, felt more fulfilled than at any other moment in his career. The experience of almost losing his life had become the catalyst for finding a new meaning for it. As for Mrs. Thompson, besides receiving proper treatment for her cardiac condition and seeing her health improve significantly, she had found a new family in the clinic team. Her knowledge, experience, and wisdom were constantly sought, not only for medical issues, but for the ethical and human dilemmas that arose in daily life. 1 year after the inauguration, during the small anniversary celebration of the clinic, Henry found Mrs. Thompson silently contemplating the panel at the entrance of the space that bore her name, where photos and testimonials from patients formed an exciting mosaic. "A penny for your thoughts," he said, approaching. She smiled. "I was just reflecting on how life comes full circle, Doctor. If someone had told me, that night when I was dismissed from your office, that a year later we would be here celebrating all this, well, I probably would have suggested they see a good neurologist." Both laughed, sharing the irony of that unlikely path they had traveled together. "You know what surprises me most," she continued. "It's not just the impact on patients' lives, although that is deeply gratifying. It's seeing the transformation in the healthcare professionals who work here. That young doctor who talked to me at the inauguration, she joined the team last month, said she finally found a place where she can practice medicine the way she always dreamed." Henry nodded, understanding perfectly. "That makes me think about what we could have built together 15 years ago if I had supported your complaint against Frank and the others. How many lives we could have impacted, how much suffering avoided." It doesn't help to look back with regret, Doctor. The important thing is what we do with the time given to us from now on. And look what we're doing." She gestured to the space around them, vibrant with activity, purpose, hope. Sometimes we need to travel winding paths to arrive exactly where we should be. In that moment, as they observed together the constant flow of patients, doctors, and nurses in the illuminated corridors of New Paths Clinic, Henry understood a profound truth. His heart attack had not just been a medical crisis, but an opportunity for rebirth, and Mrs. Thompson had not only saved his life that night on the sidewalk, but his soul, his essence as a doctor and as a human being. "What do you think about expanding to another city next year?" he suddenly asked, a spark of enthusiasm in his eyes. John Paul mentioned that the foundation would be willing to support a second unit, perhaps in the Midwest. Mrs. Thompson smiled, recognizing the renewed energy and clear purpose that now guided that man, so different from the cold and calculating doctor who had dismissed her a year before. "One step at a time, Doctor. We still have a lot of work ahead of us here. But yes, I believe we're just getting started." And so in that space that was born from an unlikely encounter between a doctor who had lost his way and a nurse who had never abandoned her principles, a new page of American medicine began to be written, not with grandiose promises or magical solutions, but with daily commitment, hard work, and the simple but powerful belief that caring for others is the true core of any health practice worthy of the name. End of story. Dear listener, what did you think of this transformation story? Do you believe that Dr. Mitchell really changed, or that his new attitude was just the result of the scare he had? How would you react in Mrs. Thompson's place, seeing that doctor who had despised her, fallen on the sidewalk needing help? Tell us in the comments what you would do in this situation. This story reminds us that sometimes we need difficult moments to find our true purpose in life. If you identified with this message, don't forget to leave your like, share with friends who would also appreciate this reflection, and especially subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next touching stories. Your company is what motivates us to continue bringing content that touches the heart.